You're listening to Gone Mobile, your input and output for all things .NET-MAUI and mobile.
Welcome back to another Gone Mobile. Alan, I thought we'd continue on the topics, the really fun, exciting topics today. What do you think? Do you have any?
This was all your notes too. And it's funny, you went to dependency injection. This was supposed to be an episode where John was supposed to babble now, but I guess he's left this one to me.
Well, you just said that it was my turn to figure out what the topic was. You didn't really say it had to be something I was going to talk about.
Well, it's true. It's just, we have our strengths. So this, I'm guessing this is one of mine.
Yeah, it's definitely not mine.
Okay.
I've relented enough to say, yeah, I'm using dependency injection and it's a good thing, and I'm glad we got it in Maui along with all the other stuff. But I'm still a little bit unlearned on some of the dependency injection stuff.
I do have a screenshot of you saying you bought in. I kept it for just in case.
Well, I mean, yeah, it could have gone either way, I guess.
I'm
right?
still waiting
I
for
bought
RX
in
to
and been
appear.
like, no.
Once you say RX,
no,
I'll take the screenshot of that too.
I need to make like a library that I call RX or something like that, and just so you're like, oh, you did it finally. Like, no, it's something totally different.
All right, so we're talking about DI.
Yeah.
DI, dependency injection.
Yeah. This isn't a .NET specific concept, right? By any means. I've seen it pop up in many places.
I think it actually started more in the Java world, to be honest.
Okay.
No, I don't know. Castle Windsor, like the library.
Yeah. Not the castle.
Not the castle itself. That one is, when I was working with NHibernate like 20 some odd years ago, I contributed to that open source quite some years ago.
I don't know what's kind of more shock value, if it's that NHibernate is that old, or if that, you remember working with something that long ago. I mean, I do too, but just like when you say it that way, it's like, yeah, it was 20 years ago. Ooh.
Well, it was in because I worked with Hibernate. Like when I started out of school, I was in Java, and I got into Hibernate really quick because I like the code. I like SQL less, even though it was changes from time to time.
Hibernate was an ORM,
yes,
right? Yeah, okay. So what did that have to do with dependency injection?
Because it was so interwired with. Do you remember lazy load? Did you ever use Hibernate? You must use.
I think I used NHibernate.
So they had this concept of like lazy loading proxies, right? So if I went like I had an order, and then let's say I had order items, but I only said, okay, get me the order, and then what I do is I'd go through it, and then I go, okay, now .order items, and right away the proxy would go, hey, I'll load that up. You haven't loaded it up already. So that was Castle Windsor. And Castle Windsor back then was like a huge, now Windsor was the DI library. They still have Castle Dynamic Proxy. That might be one that people have heard of. That's the NHibernate thing. So it's a really cool way of like at runtime building IL around your code. So it was like Stone Age kind of source generators.
Yeah.
But run at the runtime, right? It took forever to start. Like, man, it's like we didn't care about startup time back then. And I know that's kind of hypocritical coming out of me because like enterprise libraries, I'm like, who cares? Like John and I always go through this debate. He's like, I want an app nice and trimmed, and it's got to start up with like 300 milliseconds faster. And I'm like, there's no enterprise customer that gives, where's the beep button about that?
Yeah.
And there isn't, right?
But my customers aren't enterprise, so.
Well, the ones I see using Maui are usually pretty.
No. I don't mean Maui itself. I mean my pool app, of course.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you got to shave that 100 milliseconds that nobody knows about, but that's fine. That's
people want to be swimming, not putting in data into their pool app.
So they had dynamic proxy. We had Castle Windsor, which was like I don't know that there was a dependency injection library before that. I don't. It was a different era back then. We didn't have open source. We had open source, but it was the old open source hub we used to use.
Well, there was a Microsoft one. There was
nobody used that. That was even before that.
I know. Yeah, no. There. What? It's gonna bug me now.
Microsoft's Codeplex.
Yeah, Codeplex. That was
they
theirs.
killed that pretty quick.
What was? I still see the other one if we're thinking of the same one every once in a while. Like it's still there as a website.
Yeah, it's like some old decrepit
It's
thing.
not. Is it SourceForge? Is that?
Oh, that might be it. Is that where? Yeah,
I
that's
don't
where
know.
and Hibernate
Or
was.
is
Okay.
that a? I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe
It
it
was a
was.
lot harder to find this stuff back then because we didn't have NuGet. We didn't have Crepes. We didn't have half the tools we did. Maybe we were better off. I don't know. Seemed to get things done. Anyhow, so Castle Windsor was like the first DI container I knew of. It was slow. Things have evolved quite a bit since then. I'd say the most feature-rich one out there is probably AutoFac. I know Dan Siegel of Prism fame would argue his dry IOC. He lives and dies by that. And that's made by a fellow out of Ukraine, I believe.
Okay.
Anyhow,
Yeah, I know there's a bunch of them. Well, and let's back up a step too, because like what? Well, did those probably initially at least started as their own kind of totally separate libraries, right? Is that true? Because when I think of those now, and maybe you can still use them that way. I'm sure you can. But what I think of now is, when I look at those, I think of them more as the things that I could opt to plug into kind of the Microsoft extensions stuff.
Yes.
Instead of like using them super directly, I guess.
Well, we're definitely going to come back to that because the Microsoft extensions where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
So Microsoft did have their own dependency injection. So they had, was Unity part of it at some point?
I don't know.
And then they gave that one away. And then they had another one that was kind of like attribute based, which a lot of companies ended up using. I forget the name of it right now. Getting old. But it worked. They worked. They were just really slow. They were big dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
AutoFac is still out there. It's a big dinosaur. It has all these features, but Microsoft released the extensions dependency injection. And I think they did, I'll say they because it's a different team. So,
well, yeah, I had nothing to do with it.
So I think they decided to build that because there was too many options in the world, right? So you just get a central focus. Like this is how you do it in ASP.NET. If you still want to use your original dependency injection container, here's how you can integrate with it. But here's the standard interface, which wasn't a bad idea because it kind of did unify us under a banner.
Yeah.
Which was great. So now we had dependency
it's one of those things that's such a big part of a lot of projects that you kind of want to have some out of the box opinionated way to do it, right?
Right. So it was a good thing because everybody was using dependency injection, but nobody was really doing it properly.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody under the sun, I mean, I've been working with Xamarin since since the Simian days, like Novell.
Yeah.
And, everybody started doing dependency injection back then and it took forever. I've seen an app where they used AutoFac and it took like 30 seconds for the Android app to start. Somehow iOS got through it. But
iOS was always faster, right? For several reasons, but
right. So they just had over-engineered it. 30 seconds.
Wow. Well, and this is where I think there was, because like historically there, as you I think alluded to just by saying like, oh, yeah, finally doing dependency injection. Was historically a lot of pushback and resistance against using that in the Xamarin space from like Xamarin. I'm not saying
Xamarin.
that. I'm not saying that like enterprise developers had a problem with it. It was like us kind of saying, why would you do that? That makes your app so slow.
Oh, I used to go batty about that. You think, well, I would nag at you sometimes, but a little bit less. It was usually James, and obviously Miguel is as anti dependency injection as one can be, but dude doesn't build enterprise apps. He doesn't deal with like these massive teams doing these massive things, right? So maybe we might have less bugs.
And now, like I said, I'm using it in my app. We have it in Maui. I know like James has come on board with it, in the last, I don't know, however long.
So James's argument when I talk to him, I like James. Sometimes I want to backhand him though. He was like, I don't. It's not that I don't like dependency injection. Bullshit. Because you didn't, and that's all right. You didn't have to. You got your job done, right? But he's like, it had to be out of the box, which that's believable, right?
Yeah.
He wants a standard way of doing it, like we all do. You want to know it's pretty safe to use and it's tested and it's fast. Now, when we talk about the Microsoft extensions, the default container you get out of the box is actually pretty damn fast. Like they did a good, solid job on it. So that's why I started using it pretty exclusively in my apps. other than when you get into Prism and dry IOC, but we won't get into that today. Doesn't matter. The point is that thing is super fast. It gets a job done. It does more or less all of the features that you need. AutoFac's got some real deep stuff, but it's meant more for server, right? Like AutoFac is such a big beast of 4 million flavors of features. And if you need that, it's there, right?
Yeah. So like what, I mean, I don't think we want to get too deep into, a lot of the server use cases necessarily. Like I think keeping it mobile oriented, but what, I think it's worth kind of talking through what are the differences between some of them? Like why would somebody, and yeah, I get there's server differences, but like, is there consideration in the mobile space for why I might want to use, dry IOC versus Microsoft versus AutoFac, whatever.
So that's a tough. You had this one loaded.
Yeah.
I swear, John came loaded today to pound some questions in
teed
there.
Up.
So, I mean, Dan and Prism and stuff, they like dry IOC because they want a mutable, not an immutable container, a mutable container, meaning that you can change it. You can add stuff to it. They become available, right? I'm not sure I agree with that. It works for them, and the dry IOC is super fast. I just don't like how it waits on dependencies. It does like timers, and if a dependency doesn't become available in like X amount of seconds, it throws an error, and I don't know. There's something about it.
When's it gonna? If it's not available now, when's it gonna come available? I don't know.
Right, like if it's in your registration process, like as soon as I start resolving stuff and how I validate it, there's. I don't know. That dude has made it work. And it works well. I don't know how, but the science behind it is pretty magical. I have always been a fan of the immutable containers. So the ones that have like a builder pattern, right? So AutoFac has a builder pattern. The Microsoft extensions has like the service collection. And then you say build service provider and it puts it all together and validates it. So I'm a fan of that personally because then what's there is done. It works. It's been validated, great. It should just do its thing. These mutable containers, though, like I said, that used to be the way we did it. I don't know. In the Castle Windsor, that's the way it did it.
Yeah,
and I does it that way. And
guess I kind of struggled to find a lot of like there was one scenario that came into play a while back that I was using, but it was only in the context of trying to do like some third party C# hot reload extension, right? So it was like, okay, if you want to like change something out, maybe you want to just replace the service and for depending how you were doing it, right? So like I ran into that and I went down the rabbit hole of like, oh, what if I put in AutoFac and I can update stuff this way? Because I think it was the TBC reload project at the time I was playing with. This was early Maui days, right? And so it was kind of like, okay, you can use this, but it was really a simple thing that was like, here's a type that changed. What do you want? Like, you go figure out what you want to do with that information, right? And so I was like, okay, if it's something, if it's a view model, the type, I have a new version of that type. Maybe I want to swap that out in the dependency in the service collection. And so I went down that rabbit hole and very quickly didn't really like working with any of it anyway. Not from a like whatever, the DI was fine. It was more this felt really cumbersome to try and like leverage C# hot reload in my app and knowing that we were kind of already working on next evolution of that just out of the box. I was like, nah, I don't want to do this. And I went back.
Well, what's funny is if the reason I'm anti-mutable containers is that if we think about where these containers are probably going, this is a guess. I mean, it's an opinionated guess, but I feel pretty strongly in that this is what's going to be coming, is the art of registering dependencies. I get it. It's slow. It's kind of a spaghetti factory of stuff if you're not really good at what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think where it's really truly going to go, like really we did statics for years, right? We had a default container and it worked. There's still ways we can make that dependency injected, but it still sucks, right? Because it still requires like a lot of plumbing to go through all of it. Really where I think it's going to go, and you're already starting to see this appear, and there's some containers out there that are doing this, is it's just being source generated.
Yeah.
Right. So there's no registration. I mean, there's attributes everywhere, but it generates that service provider. And under the hood, the generated code is basically going, yeah, knew this, knew that. It can validate it right at compile time. And then when it starts running, I mean, it's going to be blazing fast, right?
Right.
You can still have scope services. You can still have static singletons. You can still have transients, etc. But it's going to be mega fast.
Yeah.
And now when that really does happen, there's going to be adjustments by all of us to get there. But I think it's just going to be attributes or some sort of config file. And
Yeah,
you're like,
that'll be
this,
interesting because
this,
like
this.
attributes in source gen is always like that, what you kind of want to do, but it's not. I forget if we were at the point where it's like assembly level attributes again. There we're kind of the like do that if you can because it's not the fastest to inspect every type's attributes in a source gen, but maybe it'll work.
At some point, I don't know how you don't get there because really, if you want to get to that super fast speed, that's going to do it. Like you're back to news, except this time I can change implementations with like one line. Like I can comment this out, or I'm not sure. But if I look at dependency injection, it's going to be less about the injection and more about the registration. It's going to be dependency registration. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. There's lots of other things that are in there, right? But that's where I see it going. So that's could be what changes of some of this complexity and kind of gets rid of, I don't know. Do we even need containers at that point if it's source gen?
Maybe not.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Even though like when we were looking at putting in the Microsoft extension stuff and the dependency injection in particular, performance was a concern. And like early Maui days, we started measuring a lot of it, and I think we were surprised at how quick the parts that we thought were going to be slow were. And it wasn't, it was other things that we didn't really think that much about. They were like, oh, let's not do that because that's actually slow.
Well, I think when you guys started out, because I remember having pretty in-depth conversations with you about it, was that hosting. And I was like, you got to get that big honking beast out of there. Because it wasn't, they built hosting for like a console app. Or
the pattern doesn't really apply perfectly to mobile apps. So
right. And then you guys started putting it into like your own host.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you got rid of configuration. Is configuration still in there?
Configuration is still there.
But it's like just the abstractions. I don't think there's anything
we don't have anything concrete. Like I know there's been different. Did you do a plugin for some of that? Like there's been a few efforts to like make a configuration provider that can source gen and because again at the end of the day like those were the parts that we realized these aren't actually the fastest parts because the plumbing of how that some of those were implemented for like the server side first idea. It just didn't scale well on mobile. Like reading in a JSON file, when your app starts up, just not the fastest thing to do. Well, it's not bad, right? But it's not good.
So now we've got such high speed libraries too. Like we have system text JSON, which is much faster than Newtonsoft because it's just designed to be fast. It's not designed to be feature rich. So that's out there.
That's better,
Shiny
but
does
it's still
have like a config where you can read it out of the assets library.
Well, and that's better. But like I think the default people were going to is like, oh, put it as an embedded resource in your assembly, and then you got to read that back out, and there's all sorts of like little, paper cuts doing that way.
It's so on track. I guess I'm looking at about 50 milliseconds usually, and that's for a fairly decent. Now we're talking about micro-sized JSON files, right? Like
it's
even
again,
if it's a couple
not,
hundred lines, like it's
nothing. It's not bad again, but it's not. It's like I think the difficulty has always been, we're trying to like when we look at startup, performance improvements and like if you look at some of what Jonathan Peppers has blogged about and done stuff with, it's like we're looking at any tens of milliseconds are now like, hey, I can save 20 milliseconds by doing this in the Maui startup path differently. It's like, that's a win, right? So
the other big one that was logging though. And that was Peppers that found that, right? Like the console logging you guys had turned up by default and you're like, whoa, we better turn that off, right?
Right.
Because everything was going through it. But once you got those dependencies in order and under control, here we are today. And I mean, really in terms of startup, it's a blip, it's a flash in the pan overall. Now, I mean, that's you guys working on optimizations and stuff, but really, I don't feel you had to do a ton around dependency injection. I think it was always the dependencies or that stupid hosting model
Yeah.
that doesn't fit what you need anyways.
No, exactly. And that was the kind of, realization that we didn't expect was that the parts that were fast, were the parts that we really wanted. So it was all good.
Well, the thing is, those extensions assume that they have control of the life cycle of the app. Well, I think iOS and Android might have something to say about that.
Yeah.
And they don't really let you.
No.
Like a lot of people I see try and do like dependencies and resolve dependencies in the startup and then do async stuff in the app. And it's like, don't do that. Just go to a page, do your async things, then enter the app, right? But stop.
Yeah.
And it's always a case of the dependency and how it's used, where stuff starts to hit the fan. Because really, dependency injection doesn't have to be slow.
No.
And I think if we get to the strongly typed version of it, I think some people still find a way to make it slow.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's always going to be somebody who does that. So we've kind of talked, around dependency injection stuff. Actually, one of the things that I was curious too is like when we're talking about different implementations and stuff. I know after I did things completely properly from a dependency injection perspective, I kind of moved away from wishing I had this. But do some of them still do like property injection and stuff? Like, is that still a thing as opposed to constructor injection? Because like that's the default, right? You create your class and then you define in your constructor all of the different things that you want to magically be injected into that constructor when it's called.
I actually don't know. So I've never done property injection, and there's reasons for it. I'm not going to say it defeats the purpose of doing dependency injection.
No,
that's not true at all. But it does tell you what's absolutely needed. But we can, things like with C# required, like a required property now.
Yeah.
You can. I don't even know if that helps, to be perfectly honest. But
yeah, you kind of set yourself up potentially for being like, hey, I can just new up this type, and there's no
and all of
things,
a sudden,
and then it just doesn't work at all.
All the Lego pieces are missing, and it's like, okay, well, it couldn't spin itself up, and everything's null. You didn't know better, right?
I think I ran into that when I was like trying to, at the tip of everything, I'm like, I still want to new up the first thing, and then everything else kind of waterfalls after that, from dependency.
You had lots of services, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just
and so then
to like of services.
Try and new up that first one, which has to pass in everything, because that was a problem. And then I, quickly realized, okay, the better way to solve this is just to do the service stuff correctly. And
it takes learning. Like I said, I've seen people, like there's an app I'm working with now that's flipping huge. It's huge, and they'll pass through like 20 services, and like 6 of them are required, and probably hardly any of them get, like a fraction of them get touched, right?
Yeah.
On a standard small whatever page, they don't get touched. And then because they need to pass in those services to get it to their base view model, it's like there's like a whole whack going through it. And so it's like they want to give their developers carpal tunnel. That's the joke I usually make. I'm like, if you like typing, this is the way to go.
Well,
Make sure you can copy and paste that.
That's exactly that part of the, my kind of path of realization there. It was like, oh, I've got my base view model, and now I've got all these things. And that's where, we talked about, and I think even in the last episode, about doing like the services of services, right?
Right. But that comes with hassles too, because then you have to get into what the life cycles of those are, right? So you don't pin them.
Yeah.
And the concept of pinning them is, I mean, the life cycles, right?
Well, this is a good transition,
it's a good
maybe.
Segue. Yeah. So they used to have a whole bunch of them, right? There used to be like a web scoped. There used to be thread. So you remember when thread static was a thing?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah, that was quite a while ago. So they used to have this concept of all these like different scoping mechanisms. And what it turns out is that was bloody complicated, right?
Yeah.
It was really complicated. The easiest thing they found to do was, if you want scoped, right? What does that scope mean? So in ASP.NET, it's the scope of a web request, right? So scoped means I get a request in, start the scope. That's going to include the HTTP context, which includes the URL, all the stuff about the request, can get my cookies, and I don't have to worry about colliding with another user's data, right? At least in terms of that sense. And instead of trying to figure out how to implement a web scope, because, for a while there, we had we had Kestrel, there's IIS, there's, they all worked on the ASP.NET engine, but there was like subtle differences. And then we even had to have these little one-off web servers kind of taking off. And it was like, what does it mean to that? So when we got this scoped, and I don't know who invented it, might have been Castle Windsor still, but it was like, okay, you're just going to have like a container of a container.
Mm-hmm.
It knows how to register scope, and you start it when you want, you end it when you want, and that's when it goes. So, which that was great. Singleton, always been the same thing. It hasn't changed.
Yep.
This was kind of what really made dependency injection good, because you didn't have to worry about,
There's
if it
no
was
static
Singleton,
somewhere,
just,
right?
yeah.
You just get the instance of it, and it's
well,
there.
that's the funny thing. It should never be static underneath the hood, right, in the container itself, but the container would be static.
Right.
So you'd just keep getting the same thing. So it was great. But that's always worked the same. And then transient was the same thing, but I saw a lot of people screwing up, right? Because they didn't want it singleton. They didn't have a scope, and transient, it was like, well, to the container, that's one of those ones. I call it the garbage feeder.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, you want that. Okay.
Here's an
like,
instance.
Like the assembly factory. It just gives it to you, but it never crushes the can at the end. So if you didn't clean up if you got stuff that needed to be cleaned up in it, well, you got to crush the can yourself, because you asked for it off the assembly line. You got to send it back for recycling yourself. But if you enter the scoped, it's like, yeah, I'll just keep a string on each one of those cans. And as I feed it to you, you can keep asking for different things, but I'll keep giving you the same can in that scope. And then when you tell me I'm done, I'll pull those cords and rip all the cans back in and crush them for you.
Yeah.
Right. So it was really a good use of doing it. It wasn't a bad analogy either.
No, it's not too bad. So what does that look like from a Maui app perspective?
Well, so there's a couple things, right? I've seen, I think when Maui first started and people were kind of entering the world of dependency injection, because it forced it on some new devs, which I think it was the right thing to do. I mean, I was a big advocate when you guys started doing it. I was like, now you're doing it the same as ESP.NET.
Yeah, no,
and everybody's trying to
regrets.
plug this in themselves, and they keep screwing it up. So they still keep screwing it up, a lot of people, but that's all right. At least there's a way that you should be doing it, right? But because there's still that kind of half story around view models, people started registering their view models as singletons. And that's a problem, because
I mean, unless you very well know why you might want that in some specific case, but I have a hard time thinking of when that would be.
I'm not sure if people understand it, because, if you think about a page, like a page is you spin it up, I enter some stuff, and then it tears down. It's always been that way. You start up a screen, right? If it was Windows Forms, we knew up a screen, we popped it on, right? If it's a web page, spin up the page, request the URL, here's your page. Like, it's one and done. Sure, memory flows within that scope of things, but I don't want to come back to that URL. And it's like, hey, I still got all your credit card and stuff in here, by the way.
Yeah, all those properties that you filled out and, were two-way bound or whatever, they're all still here.
Oh, and by the way, it's also shared across the entire website. We made it singleton across the entire website. So now we're showing the last person's credit card that was entered on that page. Here you go.
Great.
Right? I mean, obviously that's not going to happen for a web page, but you get my point.
Yeah.
And obviously in a mobile app, it's my scope. The problem is that you now have to write code to clean up. Like, I want to turn that text box back to blank. I want to turn the selected drop down back to the default. It's like, if you had to just started it new and the view model was new, you wouldn't have to deal with that, right?
Right.
So obviously the two for that is transient and scoped. Now, in a mobile app, personally, everything is a singleton or scoped to me. Services are always singleton. Again, this is my opinion. You do what works for you.
What about
I wouldn't make anything
your
transient
pages or your view models?
Right. And the reason is that transient, like I said, you got to crush your own cans at that point. I don't think it does Maui any helping. Like, how do you clean up the page now properly? Yeah, I mean, you guys are imploding it through the navigation service, but you can't get at the view model. Maybe you could.
Well, I mean, it depends how
binding context. Is it disposable? Do you guys do that?
I don't know. Yeah, good question.
I doubt it.
And that kind of like leads into, some of the questions. And even you and I were talking about it, and I wasn't sure what our default, where our boundaries for scopes were. there is a doc that we have that's just on the wiki on GitHub that has a little bit of information that Shane put in about scopes.
And I'm not even sure that's up to date.
It might not be. Yeah, 2 years ago.
Pretty sure, and I know Prism, and I mean Dan will spec me after if he knows otherwise, but I'm pretty sure Prism puts that as a scoped per page.
Yeah, I don't have confirmation or either way to say like, yeah, we're doing that on a page level. I know we're doing it on a window level.
Okay. Well, and it's easy once you know or you have some sort of control, you can spin those things up and go. So I wouldn't be surprised if Dan broke it down, because I know the way the navigation service works is they might want that scoped per page.
Right.
Something we're going to need to confirm, because I'm working on some stuff right now where I need to know that.
I mean, I don't think we do have a page scope. I could be wrong, but I'm kind of leaning towards no, we don't.
It might make life easier for you guys later on, because now you can soup up optimize, because as soon as the page disposes, the container will dispose with it and clean up all that memory. As opposed to, because a window, I mean, personally, I don't use windows I probably should be. I have not used a window yet in Maui, only because I've become adjusted to Xamarin Forms not having windows.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your use case. Most people don't need multi-windows.
Well, there's, it's funny we say that, because I did find a reason the other day. Javier did some sort of debugging library that checks the CPU. It was a really interesting concept, but he did a window overlay.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what, it doesn't screw up your layout.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty clever. So he puts the window and puts a transparency on it so you see your stuff. Which I was like,
well, there's a whole, there's a whole API in Maui to do that too, right? Where you can add like window decorators or whatever. It's actually used internally more than that's why we did it. It's used by like hot reload stuff and in the IDE, so that they can like, when you're like hovering over something and it outlines, what that looks like on the live preview, like it'll show the outline of like the control or whatever. There's stuff like that. Yeah, some people do.
I don't use it. I used it for a short period of time and I was like, yeah, it's nice. I just want to have hot reload.
Yeah, there's a whole like live visual tree stuff, which it can be handy, because we do show like the Maui, tree hierarchy and stuff. It's kind of cool.
Fair. That's advanced UI stuff for me.
Yeah.
I'm grids and stacks. If I can get a grid, occasionally a flex. But that's it. That's all I need. So, but I did find it clever how he did the window overlay, and I had never seen that concept. It does make sense. So
yeah, it's pretty neat. It's a pretty like drawing based API, I think, still. But
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it was. I think it was like it was that Microsoft Hack Week.
Yeah. No, I know which one you're talking about. What thing he was working on. It is pretty cool. Yeah. Anyway, scope wise, like I guess part of my point was like we probably need to do a better job of documenting like where those different scopes sit in Maui by default. Mm-hmm. From what I could tell, like it seems like we're doing it on modal pages, because they're kind of expected to be their own, almost like a window, but not really a window.
You might not have a need for it. I'm 90% sure it's a Prism thing that I'm thinking of, where it goes down to the page.
And but that doesn't mean that somebody couldn't start creating their own scopes on their own pages, right? So,
well, and that's the thing, right? Like Dan's got his navigation service in Prism, so he has access to the service provider.
Mm-hmm.
As he's newing up pages, because he's in control of the nav stack there, he can create a scope. In fact, I know now that I think about it, I know 100% fact he's doing that, because I had to write something custom recently to do that. Anyhow, it works well. It cleans up. I'll have to think about that when I'm doing my new Fandangoed, the mediation stuff we were talking about in our last episode.
Yeah.
I've been kind of farting around with that, making some good progress. I think it's going to be interesting. But right now it's dependent on that scope, which probably is not going to work.
Yeah, not by default. There's always some weird stuff when we talk about, collecting things more. Shell maybe.
If you're using Shell, but if you're using default Maui, forget you.
No, and I don't know if Shell does either. Like the problem is, like, at the end of the day, we get somebody who'll be like, yeah, when I navigate away from this page, I want this page to be disposed, and then there'll be somebody else that says, well, I don't want it to be disposed because I'm going to use it again.
No, but see, I can document my way out of that, right?
Yeah.
It's something I've been looking at anyways. Like in the mediation, we were talking last episode about how I want to make sure that all the scopes fire on that event if they're hooked. And then if they're not hooked anymore, like the page has been disposed, then they'll fire those events. They're no longer, don't resolve them. But it means I either need to own and wrap and take over the dependency injection container to see all the scopes resolving these things, which I really, really, really don't want to do. Or it means I have to have a way to watch them. And there really is no way to watch them. I've come up with kind of a way to do it right now, but it involves the container being scoped per page so that the damn things get cleaned up.
Right.
And lo and behold, here we are. That's not necessarily going to be the case. What am I going to do now? So it's all based on this thing of event collection, right? So if I see it resolve, I add it to a collection that's static. And then when that view or that scope goes out of range, I remove it from the event collection so that it can continue on. If only the window scoped, and there's usually only one window in a Maui app, because like me, I'm UI stupid. And it's never going to clean those up. So anyway, food for thought.
Yeah.
I'm getting close. And for every time I get close, I'm probably just going to end up taking over the DI container. I don't know. I hope not. I don't want to.
Yeah. I mean, well, and this kind of goes back to, I think we've talked about it before too. I really would love eventually for Maui to get a little bit more kind of in the box, conventions on things. Like what occurs to me here is, so with Prism, they're handling the navigation service and everything, right? So like, obviously they have a little bit more control over when they want to do things like clean up a page and clean up the scope and create a scope, and that just happens for you. But yeah, we have the hook in a sense, but
you do.
We do, but like I said, we run into a lot of cases where, without breaking expectations from how things work today, in a lot of ways, it's like, well, yeah, you can't just change behavior, because 50% of people are going to be mad no matter what you do.
Right. Well, the cool thing is that, again, Dan went and wrote, because I had started to write one, because I was like, I want to see, like, my hookup with my problems with Shell aren't really, I mean, I don't like the forced UI, but you don't really have to use that. Really, you don't.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I want Shell for the navigation, and I want to just be able to plug in and take advantage of this life cycle. So I had started something. And of course, Dan already wrote one. It's like micro MVVM or something. Sorry, Dan, if I got that wrong. I might have. I probably did. But naming sucks. Name your product better, and I'll remember.
He has his own another different MVVM thing, or does it plug into Prism as well?
He did it. No, it was like just a one-off thing he wanted to do that had life cycles. Basically, all the problems that I have personally with Shell.
Yeah.
He wanted the view models wired up.
Yep.
With the page, with all the life cycle, like on appearing, on disappearing, navigation arguments, etc. So he just built something. I think he did it in a day. Here you go. Do whatever you want to do with it. So, which is quite clever. I've been debating using it. I just not quite there yet. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, well, and that's the kind of stuff that, like, I do myself in my own app too now, right? And this is what I'm saying. Like, I'd really love to get some of that kind of stuff out of the box. Not to the point that you have to use it, but that, like, hey, if you don't want to go full Prism or something, and you want to just get the things that are out of the box and have view models that have those kind of life cycle things wired up and some out of the box navigation service, here you go.
There you go. I think that's you offering away. Like, I'll do it.
Well, I mean, I'd like to get there. I'd like to get there.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't mean that we have the runway to do it in the immediate future. So
I didn't say use guys. I said you.
No.
Well, in any case, Dan has one. I'll look up the
tiny
name of it.
MVVM. No, that's
not it. I think he did it because it was like, here's the ultimate way to do it. If you don't have Prism, here's like, we got to look it up. He's going to give me crap after if he hears. He doesn't even listen to this. Of course, now he will and be like, dude, why didn't you remember the name of it?
Maui Micro MVVM. Was that
there? You go. There.
I don't know.
My
But
keyboard's too clicky, or I would look
oh,
it up.
it is from Dan. That's like
Yeah,
a couple
it's
years
Dan.
ago.
I think he did it out of just spite. He was like, "See, this is how you can do it. If you want to use shell, here it is."
And the funny thing is, like, this is basically what I am saying that I want to see in the box, right? It's
See?
like some
Advertise
base
for
view
Dan.
model. Yeah.
Get Dan some sponsorships. Gotta love his stuff.
Yeah. Interesting to look at.
Yeah. So anyhow, this one works with all the DI stuff. I'm not sure if it pushes down the scoping stuff. I know for a fact now when I think about it, the Prism is doing that. But it would be nice. It'd be nice. So you guys, all you need is that navigation service now and the life cycles to a view model, and you're gold.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Exactly.
gold.
Yeah.
That's all you need. There is. I was reading the page that you were mentioning. I did see that Shane had mentioned like the modal pages have their own scope because it's essentially a micro window.
Yeah.
I did find that out the hard way. That's a very interesting point. And Android fragments, though I can't think of where the heck I would ever use that.
Yeah.
I think that was Shane going wild personally.
Maybe. I think
can't.
it helped with some of the implementation stuff that we had, where we do a lot more with fragments now than in forms ever.
Okay.
Like we switched a lot of like the navigation stuff, the implementation to use like the Android, navigation. I don't even know what it's called, but they have newer things that are in like Android X than were available when Forms was made, right?
Yep. Oh, that's how Android rolls. They keep making newer support packages.
So that helped solve a lot of problems with different shell stuff and non-shell stuff, like just the way that we were basically trying to implement our own version of what Google offers now.
Did you age significantly from doing such implementations?
I didn't do that one. Shane probably did. That was pretty hairy to work on, I know, but
did you just bury him in a dark room to go figure it out?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that was between Net 6 and Net 7, and we kind of figured out like we can either keep fighting, the implementation uphill, or like Shane can go away for a week and like just redo it on all of the Android, actual libraries and be better off for it. So
push some food under the door once in a while and let him send out the dirty plates, and then he comes out all like,
I think
the time period.
Yeah. So, but we're there. We made it. But yeah, it is a little bit confusing in terms of understanding where those scope boundaries are. So that is something that, in looking through this, I'm even like, oh, we should really try and fix up, the docs around that and make it more clear where that is, and give, if we want to give an example of like, hey, here's how you could do it with a page, but you're gonna have to manage creating the scope and cleaning it up when the page goes away and that kind of stuff.
The thing is, though, is that it really only applies to advanced. Like, you really got to be digging to get into that stuff, right? Like, even myself, I wasn't digging too hard until I started doing some of the stuff I'm talking about. And I don't know that you should ever be going that deep unless you truly understand it, right? Because if you get it wrong, like I've gotten dependency injection wrong on a server and it didn't show up in testing.
Yeah.
It didn't leak enough in testing. Even under performance tests, it went up, but we just assumed, the stupid garbage collectors.
Yeah, it's not kicking in.
Going nuts. You start putting that under a traffic of a few 100,000 users, and it starts showing really quick. That didn't take long. And I was like, oh, yeah. Sorry, I registered that under the wrong scope. Oh. Well, that's a lot of the thing that, to kind of go back, there was one thing I wanted to kind of say in closing, is that this is where people tend to get dependency injection wrong. And I said it at the beginning of the episode, but people don't really understand the term pinned. It can also apply to like event delegates, like pinning. You pin the reference, it can't get out. This is the same concept, actually. So if you have a singleton service or a scoped, well, not so much a scoped, but let's say singleton, right? And you have that singleton resolve a transient. What do you think happens to that transient? That transient is now stuck there. If you've got a locked variable to it, that transient is now also a singleton.
Yeah.
So, and there's no dispose. It won't, the container doesn't care. It doesn't watch transients. It's like, here's your manufactured can.
Yeah. Here's your instance. I don't care what you do with it.
Yep. It doesn't even attach like a handler for it to potentially deal with it in the future. It's like, it's just Pac-Man. Out it comes, right? So you got to be careful. You really got to know what you're doing with dependency injection in states. That's why I say in Maui, I mean, really, 90% of the time, it's a singleton for services, just not your view models.
No, yeah, or your pages.
Right. You can make them transient because they're still scoped. The funny thing is that when we're talking transient pages and stuff, they're actually still scoped, kind of.
Well, they're in under the Windows scope at least, right?
Right. So, well, no, I mean, what I mean is that they're going to, that transient is going to stay in memory and still be disposed of by something in Maui at some point, right? So it's kind of pseudo scoped.
Yeah.
It's just the dependency injection container isn't going to clean it up for you. So that's really what you got to look at in scoped. So, but you have to know where scope is being applied. So just stick to singleton and transient for now.
Yeah.
And if you're in Prism, doesn't matter anyways, because Dan does it for you. And I know he's doing scoped. Pretty 90% sure he's doing scoped, in which case it doesn't matter. You didn't know anyways, because all you did was say, I want this page to hook to this view model under this URI and do whatever the hell you're going to do. It's great.
Now I feel like I have to go back and look at all my code and see what I used for most of them. I know I mostly am transient and singleton, so
are you using
fine.
You're using Microsoft extensions, right?
Yep.
Like just pure?
Just out of the box.
It has so one of the things you can run in like a debug mode, so you can wrap it in a compiler check, is there's like validate scopes.
Okay.
And that'll even tell you if you're doing something stupid. The reason they don't run that out of the box, though, is obviously dependency injection. I mean, think of it like NuGets. I mean, people don't realize how hard NuGet versioning is to go and figure out that tree, right? And figure out all the versions that apply and which one it's going to get. Like, it's complicated. If you've ever seen those charts, it's friggin' stupid.
Yeah.
This is the same thing, right? It's got to go, okay, this has got a dependency on those. That's got a dependency on these.
Yeah, it has to figure out the order, right?
It's going to go through that whole hierarchy of stuff. It's not quick. It's not easy. That's like, we're going through some hardcore stuff there. So
what now? Where do you call the validate scopes on?
Pretty sure it's on the build service provider.
Okay.
So there's that extension method. That might be tough for you though, because you let Maui build that for you. So you might have to actually do the configure where it give you the service collection and then you just pass the build service provider out.
Yeah, I know there's spots in the like the Maui code base that we have, that code enabled in some cases to in debug mode. I think I've seen
for
it.
You guys.
Yeah, for us to kind of figure out and make sure we're not doing anything wrong, right?
I almost should add this to the template though, because it'd be interesting, because I bet you a lot of people don't understand that. Right. So if you're using the pure Microsoft extensions, it won't throw up a scoping issue until you actually resolve it. Right. So, but you also don't want to leave it as validate scopes in a release mode, because it takes a little while. And if you got a lot of dependencies, it's going to take a lot longer. So
we do have, there is a thing in here. So if you do a Maui app and create builder, so that I think is that what we see? Yep. The builder has a method or extension method to configure the container.
Yep.
And
which gives you the service collection.
And so that lets you say, hey, I'll use a default service provider factory. Yep. And then you can pass in the service provider options there and enable validate.
Right.
Scopes.
So you're basically, we'd almost be doing the same call that you're doing now, except providing that extra parameter.
Yep.
And to say validate scope. It'd probably be good to have that in the default template.
Yeah.
Wrapped in a debug, because I imagine a lot of people don't know that. I mean, heck, you didn't even know that, right? So
yeah, no.
And it's interesting, because I imagine that a lot of people go through and they're like, oh, why didn't it do that right away? Well, because they were trying to do you a solid by making your app start up fast.
Yes. Yeah, we don't want to opt you in, or be opinionated on slowing down your app startup if you don't want it.
Well, there you go. It's a template thing. It's a template thing.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I always hate cluttering stuff up, but maybe what we need to do is have an overload on, I don't know, on the builder, on the create builder or something.
And then just put a huge document that nobody will read. Yeah. If this isn't debugged, don't set this to true.
But
default is false.
You always want to what you always want to do. I told you so. Maybe we did actually. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I was trying to think of maybe we enabled this in debug mode by default now or something, but maybe not.
Then people will still go, "Oh, my Maui app's so slow." It's like, okay, well, man, it's got all the debug stuff wired up to it. Like, just
yeah. I mean, we deal with that already. So what's the one
that's
more?
what I'm saying. Sometimes I almost think sometimes you have to be able to have a flag to turn it on and off, right? Because people expect the debug experience to be fast, and they don't really understand why it's slow.
Yeah, you
Have
almost
looked at
need
Logcat lately?
another like
Oh my
another
God.
mode that's like
Debug fast,
validation mode or something, right? Like
debug fast, debug slow.
yeah, all the instrumentation turned on mode
What?
versus
It might help. I don't know.
slim debug, or what was the
Oh,
term
we had a good term. What was it again? I don't remember. Oh, we should have written that one down. It was a good one. It was much better than slim binding.
yeah was
I'm
so
gonna have to go watch the episode. I
is
can't watch
this
myself.
is this supposed to throw if I have something on, then if I have that turned on?
Look at your console.
Yeah, I know, I don't see anything.
Do you have logging even turned on that sucker?
I mean, I have some stuff logging. Let's see. Maybe it's farther up in the. Maybe it's earlier in the
Maybe you
output
don't
that
have
I'm
any
looking.
scoping problems.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like something should happen if I have scoping problems, right?
It's usually gonna, as far as I remember, I usually don't screw up scopes anymore. Knock on wood. It's possible to do, but usually when you're coding these things, it's usually when you're coding libraries where you start going, "Oh, did I get that scope right?"
Yeah.
But I haven't, knock on wood, had a scope validation error in quite some time. Might even throw I'm pretty sure it throws an exception, to be honest.
That's what I was thinking. It might throw an exception.
But you have to abuse it, right? Like, it has to see the pin. It's like, dude, you've got a singleton, you're passing a transient into it. What the hell are you doing? Pass the iService provider and manage it then.
Yeah.
Right? That's what they want you to do.
Yeah. I don't know. My scopes are great. Perfect. Best
Are you
scopes
leaking
ever.
memory?
I'm probably leaking memory though. Who knows? Maybe not from that. Maybe from something else.
Yeah, well, that's why we get paid the big bucks to keep fixing the stuff, right?
All right. Well, I think that was pretty informative. I don't know which to pick in terms of a plug-in packager product. Like,
can we do Dan's micro MVVM?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Let's do it because that's on Shell.
Maui micro MVVM, because we could plug a DI provider, but I feel like those don't need any help. Like, people know about them and use them, and if you don't know about them, like, don't go use them until you need to.
Well, let's plug the one, because I know, like, don't use AutoFac in a Maui app. Just don't.
Yeah, no, don't. Please,
it's
please.
too big. People that were
slow.
using it are like, oh, it's slow. No, that's a heavyweight, right? Like, AutoFac does everything, and the kitchen sink. It's great for server.
Yeah,
but for mobile, let's give Prism's favorite dry IOC.
Okay.
Again, I think that's a Ukrainian gent that writes that.
Sure. Great.
It's a performant container. It's mutable. I have to say mutable because Canadians go, did you say immutable or mutable?
Yeah. You can mutate it.
Mutable. Yes, you can mutate this container. It's one container. Well, technically it's not. You can new up a new container on your own, but anyhow, whatever. That's another great one to take a look at.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll like I said, I usually forget to actually make the show notes, so maybe one of these times I will, and if not, you can go search those, or ask Copilot about it. Probably, I'm sure it'll tell you something.
Just you don't put these in the show notes?
I sometimes. I mean, if I remember. Well, you know what I need, because the thing we use has a spot to put links associated with the episode. That's like a separate thing. What I need is for the tooling that we use to record to, like, call out and be like, "Hey, here's the thing you said you were going to link to," right? We need some more AI.
Do some of these things. You tend to micromanage the administration stuff. I can always do some.
I think you have access to that one, so you can go add all the links you want to your heart's content.
I just had, so today, just for funny, I moved all my microphone around. People love to hear this stuff because, when I do stupid things, I'm supposed to be smart. I'm not sure if I am or not. The jury's always out on that. But today I moved my microphone because it's been constantly like you can see it now. Look at it.
Well,
right
maybe.
there.
I don't know if we'll still do videos yet. Yeah.
You've been complaining like, dude, talk into your mic. And I'm like, I'm just talking. I don't know.
You gotta get right
why
into
do I
it.
have to lick the microphone for it to hear me?
Because
No, I'm not a singer. Nobody wants to hear me sing. So why do I have to go blah, 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 right?
Yeah, because you have to. That's
okay. Well, I'm close enough now.
Physics.
Nobody's complaining. Anyhow, so today I decided to rewire it. And I know you have to leave some extra wire in the tension. And I did, but when I moved the arm decided, no, well, there's not quite enough tension for me. So it pulled all the wires tight. And when I moved the microphone down with my finger, the stupid micro USB in my $350 microphone bent like nothing. And then I was like, why isn't my microphone on? Why isn't my microphone on? I don't know.
The USB.
So John's like, are you coming? Are you coming? Are we doing this? Are we doing this? I'm like, I think I just botched my microphone.
Wait, let me run to the store and spend a bunch of money.
Well, no, hang on. I got another micro USB cable. I plugged it in. Nope. Got another one. Nope. I tried to pull open the original one. I was like, okay, yeah, the wire's broken. I quickly tried to rig it up, got it connected, plugged it back in, and the microphone just started blinking. I'm like, this is not good. And John's been like, are you going to get that XLR? I called it a DLR. I don't know. I'm not sure what I was thinking.
It's like a hybrid between a DSLR and XLR.
And he's like, that'll give you power. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go get one of those things. And he's like, well, you could just get this one for $200, or here's the Mecca that's like huge. It's huge.
Yeah, it's massive.
So I got back. I'm like, you know what? I'll just get the expensive one that John
I told you it was overkill. I told you just to get the other one.
No, this one's pretty cool though. But then the funny part is John had to call me because I couldn't hear him. And we had to do a FaceTime to figure out how to set this damn thing up in record time. And it was one stupid button that looks like an ear at the bottom that I had to press. And John was screwed up. It took us probably, a half an hour to fix this damn box?
And we still don't, I still don't truly understand why mine was working without that setting and yours was not, because they're the same thing. But,
it is pretty intuitive when you look at it. You're like, oh, well, I guess that makes sense. And I found it by accident because I was like, in order for me to hear myself, I had to press this button. So on this input, I have to press that button as well. Oh, I can hear stuff now.
I'm starting to feel like my thing is set up wrong.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Because it works fine with those things on, but like if I turn them off, the one of the things still, anyway, I'm going to play with it now because now I feel like mine's wrong and I want it to be right.
Good. Well, I don't feel bad for you now because you're like, yeah, you could just get this one. And of course you're like, yeah, go big, go get the big one.
No.
So I got the big one. That's pretty cool. It's some sort of I don't even know what it's called. Rode.
I don't know.
That's
I don't know
the
what it's
brand.
called. I just bought it, but it has all the fun effects, right?
Well,
like I can yell at Alan over my megaphone.
Oh, see, that's cool. I have no idea how to do that yet.
You'll learn.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, next, it's going to get annoying now because he's giving me a toy.
Oh, yeah. Now it's just going to be all the episodes of
again,
where can I use effect?
Bad influence on me getting new toys. Although I was looking for a new toy, to be honest. So now I've got one.
Yeah. See, there you go.
But, next time you go to Disney, you owe me some Mickey ears or a friggin' lightsaber, man.
Maybe. We'll see.
Well, your kids are getting there. You're going to get a lightsaber.
We'll see.
I think you can see it, but they're back. They're right back in there up on the top of the shelf.
I got to go steal the kids' droids and put them up here.
Oh, yeah. See, they won't care about that stuff anymore.
No,
it's like the Lego Mario. I have the Lego Mario back there because my son was like, I don't like Mario anymore. I'm like, well, you're not getting rid of it.
Yeah.
That's mine.
Yeah.
Mine now.
Okay,
my
fine.
toy.
I'll take that off your hands. Thanks. Yeah.
All right. That was
that's
funny.
Enough.
People find it funny that we screw up too and don't know how to use intuitive interfaces.
No.
That's kind of what we do for a living, partially.
I'm not an audio engineer either, as it turns out, even if you have all the fancy dials and stuff and you don't know how to use them. So
that's where we are.
Well, on that note, if there are audio engineers that would like to tell us how poorly of a job we're doing with the audio, and actually we are, because last episode my mic was screwed up and it was a horrible thing to listen to because I Windows raised the input volume on me and I didn't check. I have to check every episode just in case something auto bumped it up. So it was like really peaking and stuff. So I'm sorry, that was pretty bad.
Well, at least it's not me this time.
Yeah.
Keep blaming me. No, it's not me.
Yeah.
I don't think.
last episode, if we asked you to leave a review, hopefully you didn't because the sound quality was really terrible and you would have left like a 2-star review. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this one's better and you can go ahead and leave that 5-star review instead this time.
Because now it sounds like I'm in your ear.
Exactly.
Like right in your ear.
It's like a nice
I don't know
little
if that's creepy or not.
quiet, fireside chat with your coffee, roasting marshmallows.
Now they think you're weird and they're not going to listen anymore.
Yeah.
All right.
Or they've already tuned out anyway, so that's probably more.
Yeah,
more
we're
of
not
a
talking
case than
tech
ideal.
anymore, so people
Exactly.
are bored.
All right. So go to gonemobile.io. You can get links to all the things. You can let us, give us some feedback if you'd like. If not, the 5-star review will do. Thank you all. See you later. Thanks, Alan. See you next time.
Ciao for now.
Bye.